any other F1 team, having both cars qualify 4 seconds off pole for the season opener would be shaming, but for Cadillac, simply being there was an achievement. As a team set out of scratch, only having its entry approved 12 months ago, it faced headwinds, political and practical. Ultimately, though, Cadillac isn't on the grid to make out the numbers. It has long-term ambitions to compete at the front, although CEO Dan Towers and team principal Graham Loudon have nimbly avoided the classic mistake of putting a timescale on it. The next challenge is to keep up with the pace of technical development, which is expected to be savage given the first year of new regs. What's interesting is that the context of Cadillac drivers seems to be framing the challenge very differently from the rivals on the grid, seeing the main issues as aerodynamic. Elsewhere, the PU appears to be the only show in town. I think Ferrari proved though you can race towards the front end, so the PU is decent, said Bottas, and we should get help from them as well. We can see what kind of deployment they're using. We can just as easily do the same. So I don't see the deployment as a limitation. It's definitely our car, especially on the aero side. We're lacking quite a lot of load, especially on the rear end of the car, which has now kind of boxed us in with this mechanical setup a little bit, because we just need to do everything that we can to protect the rear end, with the exception of Aston Martin, which is facing its unique set of problems with its Honda engine. It's particularly true of Mercedes customers have been looking endlessly at what the factory team is achieving. We've probably not even spoken about the car that much, said Piastri, because we're so focused on how to get the most out of the PU. I think one of the things we learned as kind of a difference is you can make optimising the PU an order of magnitude bigger than anything you can do with the setup of the car. There's maybe a tenth or two, but there's more to gain from the power unit. That's the biggest thing at the moment. Obviously there are caveats here, and the McLaren is much more sophisticated than a Cadillac, and an inevitable consequence of the new team's rush to make it to the grid. The difference between the Cadillac and its peers is very pronounced, and you don't have to walk from the front of the grid to the rear to make a compression, given its proximity to Aston Martin's edgy but troubled car. One old paddock hand rather rudely likened the Cadillac car as a show car you might see in a shopping mall, an exaggeration for comic effect, but Bottas pointed it out himself that it was very rushed to simply enjoy being on time. Pushing deadlines is a luxury for teams, and it can go wrong, as we've seen with Williams this year, but it would be a mistake to see aerodynamic efficiency, mechanical setup and PU operation as discrete elements of F1 car performance. In 2026, the downforce, chassis, balance and energy management are interlinked almost like never before. This is because cornering speeds have a direct bearing on the amount of energy it can harvest and how it goes about the process. Take for instance the intrigue surrounding the Mercedes factory team relative to its customers. They've been complaining some more loudly than others that Mercedes hasn't been open, but Ferrari definitely has been. For its part, Mercedes says its advantage comes from chassis as well, especially what Mercedes showed in Melbourne with different harvesting, super clipping, etc. There is definitely advantage to come from energy rich circuits, and Mercedes having that knowledge gap, so aerodynamics and balance are more important for some teams than they are for others. Cadillac, the relative lack of downforce is triggering issues throughout that. When Bottas talks about being boxed in on setup, there's a factor of being forced to dial in understeer rather than protect the weak rear end and maintain balance. Overall it translates to more sliding, which has an effect on tyre deg, and slower apex speeds, which just cost time in two ways, not just slower pace but lower levels of energy harvesting, compromising performance elsewhere. In China, understeer brings an additional penalty with the fast variable radius corners, which put a lot of energy through the corners. So Cadillac's priority in the short term is to improve downforce and pick holes and gain information from Ferrari as it looks to slowly but steadily improve. Their learning curve is steep, and you'd expect them to improve quite significantly as they grow throughout the season. Hey guys, that's it for this video. Thanks very much for watching. Remember to like, share and subscribe. Follow us on our socials, link in the description below for daily F1 news, meme and content. Subscribe to our other channels on screen right now, that'd be greatly appreciated. Thanks very much for watching. Peace out.